Arrow Season 4, Episode 12, Unchained. I gotta say, I really love this episode, mostly for a lot of characters coming into play, and also some of the really big things that they set up for the future of this season. I love getting to see a lot of characters come back. We got to see Shadow come back, even though, of course, she was in a vision. I thought for sure it was actually her sister, and I was just like, I thought they were taking the the flashbacks in like a crazy direction, but unfortunately, it was just a vision, but it was still pretty cool. So we get to see Shadow come back. We get to see Nyssa actually show up again, and she's actually escaped and made her way all the way to Central City by the end of this episode. We also get to see Katana, which was very surprising, which was really cool. I'm wondering if she'll show up a little bit more this season, or if that's kind of going to be all we get. But hopefully, we'll see her a little bit more. She's in full outfit. She has like the samurai armor and everything, and she's in the costume and stuff, so that was really cool. But I was surprised to see so many people come back, and of course the biggest surprise was Roy, because I thought for sure that they kind of finished Roy's storyline probably 2 times. I think this is like the third time. I thought, oh, he's done and he's out of the show forever now. But it was cool to see him come back in this episode. He's being controlled, which I'll just save all that stuff for the end. I couldn't believe it when they did that, but he's being controlled by this villain who calls himself the Calculator, which really was a very crappy villain name. Excuse me. But this guy's just as smart as Felicity, and he's being controlled. They find out what's going on with him, so they save his life. He's there for Thea a little bit. They have a really good emotional scene, which is like, I'm gonna assume the official end to Thea and Roy, because they have like a crying moment, and I don't believe they had that last time. I think they just went their separate ways. But it was cool seeing Roy come back for sure, and he actually wears his old outfit again, so that was pretty cool. He had a little moment. Oliver was gonna try to help Thea, who was having a crazy episode, and she ends up in the hospital by the end. And like her wound, when it opens up for a little bit, that was kind of just a crazy thing to see, because I just in that moment, it was kind of a mental factor. Like, man, what would that be like, having this wound, which definitely was meant to kill her? If that wound, with that wound opening back up and she can't breathe, and then it heals up again, just for no good reason, it just heals up. I just thought, like, what could that possibly feel like? And of course, she's going through kind of withdrawals of not killing people and taking kind of the essence of these other people and fulfilling this lust that she had, this bloodlust. And whatever Damien Dark did to her, it's worn off at this point. So now she's just weaker and weaker this entire episode, ends up in a coma, and her only real hope is for Nyssa to give Oliver this lotus, elixir, whatever it is. And of course that can only happen if Oliver kills Malcolm Merlin, who he finally had a really good moment with. It was, of course, just a simple handshake, but that's probably the best thing they've ever had outside of them knowing about the whole Arrow thing and all that stuff. Before all the craziness, they've had better moments, but this is like the best thing that they've ever really had. They had some other stuff too, like when they were actually working together, but this was like just a genuine moment where Oliver was like, I could have made a good decision without your help. And, he's like, I really appreciate that. And then it's like, yeah, you gotta kill him, and then I'll save your sister. So, they're gonna be fighting in the next episode. I can assume what's gonna happen, but who knows what the heck is gonna be taking place in this next episode. I'm really looking forward to it. I didn't expect the League of Assassins to really come back into play for quite a while. I hadn't even thought about it, honestly. I've completely forgot about Nyssa and Merlin and everything involving the League of Assassins. I'd completely forgotten about all that stuff. So I was really glad to see Nyssa come back in this episode, and I'm really excited to see what they do with the League of Assassins in this next one, and see Oliver go up against Merlin in order to save Thea, because that matter. She matters to him, but of course if he does that, she'll be mad at him as well, because he would have killed her biological father. So double-edged sword there, but of course he'll do whatever to save his sister. I'm sure in his head it's like, she'll get over that. He's a bad guy anyway. But I'm looking forward to that. loved, like I said, I really loved seeing all the characters come in this episode. It was very surprising. We got, like I said, Shadow came in, Roy was in, a lot of this episode. That was a huge surprise. I was like, and especially when Laurel mentioned maybe it was someone that looked like Roy, and everyone kind of looked at her. I'm like, yeah, that actually makes a ton of sense. It might not end up being Roy, but it was him just being forced to do something. And it was kind of cool. It was nice seeing all these characters come into play, and Katana having like her one little moment was really cool. But it was surprising. It was like an odd fan service type of episode. It was just like, here's all these characters, just boom, So it was really cool. I enjoyed that. Of course, the calculator being Felicity's father was the craziest thing. Because at first, when he showed up and he was at the meeting and everything, when Felicity showed off their new battery, I thought he figured out who they were, or at least who Felicity was. And so he kind of stalked her, and that's why he was there. He just snuck his way in, and he was going to do some random evil thing and kidnap her or something. And that's what would happen in the next episode. And then it turns out that that's Felicity's father, and I don't even know what to think about that. I'm sure he won't be like a big villain again because they did that already, so he won't continue to be like this crazy hardcore villain or anything. And I find it funny now that the voice changing thing, if she hadn't done that, then he would have known he was going up against his daughter, which it just, kind of boggles my mind. I can't believe we even see her father. I kind of thought it was just one of those things. Like her dad took off. I really don't remember her exact story about what happened with her father, but I believe it was like, well, he took off and that was it. But clearly, if he was there, either he did, kind of fake his way into it, or he's actually on the board. And he just maybe didn't show up at a lot of the meetings or whatever because he could do whatever he wants, really. So I don't know where they're going to be taking that. I'm very happy to see what happens there because he's the bad guy. And they might find out each other's secrets, and we'll see how that plays out because him being a villain, people generally don't care about their kids when they're the bad guys. It's like, oh, well, I'm still going to force you to do this if I can, get one over on you. So we'll see how that plays out, but I was pleasantly surprised by that happening at the end because I was freaked out like, holy crap, he found her. And then it turns out that he didn't exactly just have to find her. He was just like, oh, my daughter's unveiling this really big thing. It's like her moment to shine. And it's like, hey, I'm here. Surprise. And she recognized her dad, so he didn't take off. She couldn't have been too young when he left or whatever happened when her parents broke up because she instantly recognized him like, oh, crap, it's my dad. So I'm really looking forward to what they're going to be doing with that. And that's one of my favorite things. I think that's my favorite part of this episode as a whole is that as awesome as it was in itself, the best parts of this episode are things that set up, the stuff for the future episodes. Like Nissa at the end setting up the very next episode. And I'm sure the stuff with Felicity's dad is going to be like a side story for the next couple of episodes, depending on, of course, how long he's in it as just Felicity's dad and not revealed to be the calculator. It is a terrible name. It's just funny every time I hear it. And I was hoping that they'd have, they do have a Flash reference in here with Diggle, and he's like, just because you wear red doesn't make you the Flash. But I thought for sure Felicity was going to say something about, like, I have to call Cisco and tell him about this crappy name or something. I feel like that would have been a really great line to have in this episode. But I don't know what's going to happen there, but I'm very excited for it. I can't wait to see what they do with this League of Assassins stuff. It does suck to see Roy go. I was surprised to see him in general. I was surprised to see everyone that showed up in this episode, honestly. But it was great to see every single character. We got to see what Katana was doing. We got to see Nissa breaking out and starting her revolt against Malcolm Merlin, because that's kind of what she'd been waiting for ever since. I can't even remember when that happened, but that was quite a while ago. So she's been waiting for a long time. And I guess I believe it was like the actual finale of the last season, or like just before, a little bit before the finale. But she's been waiting for a long time. So she finally has her moment, and that's all there is to it. So I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to what's going to happen with Felicity. I wish Roy would stay around because I like Roy as a character for sure. It'd be awesome to see everyone kind of going out on missions and stuff, and they'd have kind of, I guess, Speedy and Arsenal or however they wanted to do it. But I know that's not going to happen. He's going to take off and do what Thea said, get married, have a couple of kids or whatever. But it was great to see everyone in this episode. When he first showed up and it was revealed to be Roy, before Laurel mentioned it could be someone that just looks like him, I thought they were going to go like the true Arsenal route, and he was going to end up like using guns and stuff, because in the comic books he loses an arm and stuff, and that's how he becomes Arsenal, because he gets like basically a gun robot type hand. And I thought that's kind of the route that they were going, where he was going to turn into a bad guy and try to get revenge on someone for something. And then it was like, no, he's just under the control of someone else because they blackmailed him, into doing it. So that was pretty interesting. And I think, now that I think about it, Felicity's dad may have known that she was there because of everything that happened. He may have had that information, like, oh, you're Red Arrow, and as Roy Harper, you hang out with these people. And I believe he was around them enough to where there would be footage like, oh, he's with Oliver, he's with, my daughter Felicity. So that might be how her dad did figure out exactly where she was, because he had all that intel on Roy. But I'm looking forward to what they do. This was a really fun episode. Had some good action in it for sure. Really, this was like, for me though, personally, I loved the story elements for this episode. In the flashback, I guess there is something else outside of Shadow showing up. Oliver does decide to totally can't think of her name. It's like Tiana, I believe. He does decide to tell her that he's the one that killed her brother. And he did something that I feel like they do a lot in TV shows, where it's like, the reasons don't matter, but ultimately I killed your brother. I'm like, I feel like that was one of the perfect moments where the reason is exactly what she needs to hear. Like, the guy who I lied and said killed your brother, he did send your brother to kill me, and I had no idea, and I had to defend myself because I thought he was just trying to kill me. But he's just like, it doesn't matter, I killed your brother. I'm like, that is not the way to say that. Like, there's so many layers, and he's just like, it doesn't really matter, I killed your brother. I was just like, that is not true. Like, it really does matter why you would do it, because the way he said it is like he just killed him, kind of for no reason, just because it was like before he decided to be a good guy or something. That's how it seems, because he gave no context. It was just like, yep, I killed him, and that was it. So I'm sure that'll be fine, and they'll kind of work past that. But he does tell her, which I'm assuming is going to matter at least a little bit. But I preferred the flashback, or the hallucination within the flashback, because I was really excited when they did that. I was like, holy crap, they killed off this guy, and I thought he was going to be like the main villain or whatever. And then Shadow's sister comes into play, and she's wearing, Oliver's like original Arrow style costume. And I was like, holy crap, she found him on the island, and all these other questions. And then it was like, no, you're just hallucinating. But he did have the rock at the end of the episode, unless he was hallucinating that being in his hand. So I don't know what that means in any way, shape, or form. Maybe that has something to do with whatever magical qualities are being inspected on the island. But I thought that was interesting. I really don't know if it's going to go anywhere. I would assume it would, because he was supposed to be hallucinating, but he did have like this insanely carved up rock. So we'll see what happens there. But, little bait and switch. And I do kind of hate it a little, because I was very excited when they killed the guy off, and I was like, holy crap, the flashbacks are about to get really awesome. But sadly, just hallucinations. But it did tie in. Finally, I felt like this episode, the flashbacks tied in pretty well with the main story, and it had a lot to do. These past two episodes could have fit with just this one flashback, because a lot of this stuff had to do with Oliver feeling like he was responsible for everything that was wrong. So it did actually parallel a lot, the flashback in the current timeline. And I like that, because I've mentioned this several times before. They have not really fit like they have in the past seasons, where it's like, oh, he learned this lesson in the past, and it applies in this regard to the present. And we finally got to see this, so I really enjoyed that. He had the hallucination of forgiving himself and not, carrying this big burden. And Roy coming in the present, he basically did the same thing, and he really confronted him about it, where everyone else was just kind of saying it like, it seems like you're holding, all this weight on your shoulders for no reason. It's like you're blaming yourself. And Roy actually just sat down and talked to him because he just had the opportunity. Like, what are you blaming yourself for this time? So I like that it finally paralleled. That was really good. Oliver and Roy in general was actually kind of awesome in this because this is the first time Roy has been in the show since Oliver, it's like Oliver 2.0. And I like that. They actually were kind of joking around and stuff and kind of laughing and just talking. I was like, this is really crazy to see. And it really sucked that it's only going to be this one episode because it was fun to watch that because we didn't have that before. So it was nice to see this sort of new style of relationship. And, Oliver, is just talking. Like, it's not super serious or anything. He's having just genuine conversations with him and talking about how he's, carrying all this weight on his shoulders, and Roy's just comfortable talking to him. And Oliver's actually talking back, which is very different compared to when Roy was a main, character on the show. So I definitely enjoyed that. Unfortunately, once again, with Roy leaving, it'll only be this episode, unless we do get to see him in the future, which we probably will, because, it depends. They used him as both Red Arrow and Arsenal, so they could easily bring him back if they wanted to just kind of tap into some comic book storylines and, whatever regard. They're obviously all over the place with this show. With both shows, really, with Arrow and Flash. They're kind of just bits and pieces all over the place, but they could bring him back. I'd love to see him. I like Roy as a character, like I said, and it would be really cool to see him interact with the team more, as this version, because he was so used to, even what they had before, it was still those characters, but they weren't the same type of team. It still wasn't the same thing. It was still Laurel just taking over for Sarah, and it was Diggle still just as the random black guy walking around without a mask. So it's very different at this point. So I would love to see that if that happens in a future season. I think that would actually be very cool, and maybe, I don't know, who knows, maybe they'll do something where he has like Teen Titans, if they decide to do that ever in this sort of universe, the TV universe, which would be really cool. But if they wanted to tap into some Teen Titans stuff, they can definitely use Roy as that, because he could be Red Arrow. Instead of Speedy being a part of Teen Titans, it would be Red Arrow. So they could easily do that, which I think would be pretty cool. But definitely a fun episode. Definitely want to know what you guys thought about it. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And with all the characters that we had just randomly show up in this episode, which was surprising, 3 of which were really surprising. I think the Nissa thing was ultimately inevitable, but Roy coming back, the hallucination of Shadow coming back, Katana just being in there in like one scene, which I don't know if that really means anything, because Nissa told her the whole story, so I would assume that we're going to get to see Katana come back again. But out of the characters we saw, or at least the living characters, I can't really ask you guys if you want to see Shadow, because ultimately she would only be a hallucination. We could see the actress again if it was her sister, but it still wouldn't be Shadow. But out of the characters we saw, mostly out of Katana and Roy, because of course Nissa's going to still be in it. So out of Katana and Roy, which character out of those two do you guys want to see come back the most? Because Roy was obviously a big part of the series. Katana was a big part of the previous season, both present timeline, mostly in the flashbacks, of course, and then like the second half of the season is when she was actually in the present. But she was still a big part of that season, and obviously she had some very serious stuff going on where she had to ultimately, kill her husband and stuff, and all the stuff that happened with their son and everything, which is just tragic leading up to that. I was like, man, he's not in the present timeline, he's gonna be dead, and of course that ended up happening. But out of the 2 characters, I want to know which character you guys want to see come back the most, whenever they do. I feel like Katana might actually come back again. I think Roy is the one that we kind of have to just wait and see. I think Katana, though, we might actually have, maybe in a couple episodes from now, honestly, Katana might end up showing up again. But for me personally, I'd like to see Roy come back. He was already a part of the team. He can joke around with the characters. It would be cool to see him, like I said, in this new team dynamic, because they're such a well-oiled machine compared to how they used to be. And this is coming off of Oliver having been away from the team for a while, when it was just Laurel, Diggle, and Thea. And Roy was, not even involved in that. So there's so many dynamics that he kind of missed just jumping back into this episode. And it still just flowed like a normal team. But it's so insanely different. I would personally like to see Roy come back just to see him kind of get back into this world with sort of the new dynamics that we have, especially with Oliver being, Oliver 2.0 and actually laughing and stuff and running for mayor and all these other weird things. But personally, I'd like to see him come back. That actually reminds me, I totally skipped over the Damien Dark thing, but they also did that in the episode because he was going to meet him and then he didn't because he had to focus on the main mission for this episode. So ultimately that kind of went nowhere anyway, so doesn't really matter. But Damien Dark's wife is running against Oliver, and I don't know what that means. That kind of has me worried a little bit. He was already in trouble as Oliver running for mayor because he wasn't going to do, what Dark said, and now he's running against his wife. I don't know if that means less attacks on him or if it just doesn't mean anything whatsoever. So I'm kind of worried about that. I don't know where it's going to lead. If that's going to lead to whoever, ends up dying, if this is going to be the thing that leads to that or what. But I don't know. They kind of just brushed over it in this episode. It was like we got way more important stuff to deal with. But Damien Dark's wife is going to be running, and that's definitely going to have an impact on however many episodes Oliver's actually running, for mayor. So we'll see how that plays out. But like I said, I want to know which, out of the two characters, out of Katana and Roy, which character do you want to see come back the most? And of course, I want to know what you guys thought about this episode in general, because a lot of interesting things happen. So please, comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.